Hey everyone, hi again. So I always talk about the shell and the admin API, so this time we're going to talk about the router. That is something that I don't think was ever mentioned. Maybe Fred mentioned sometimes in some presentations, but not much. So I'm going to try to give an overview of router and also the latest features. I'm still the same person, I believe. This is not going to be an extensive history lesson, it's just some dates. So router first labs release was in 2015, 16 the integration with MySQL cluster that I talked about this morning, GA in 17, in 19 we added support for GR notification, we're going to talk about it, and the REST API. 21 support for MySQL cluster set, and in 8.1 we added support for with replicas and statement tracing, and the most recent feature and very desired one with MySQL. Okay, I'd like to show a bit how the architecture of router looks like in very high level. So the router is built on, it's part of the server repo, and it's built on top of a chassis that is called a harness. And this chassis has a loader to load plugins because the router is was developed to be a pluggable architecture, and has some util libraries to handle networking and these kind of system-related things. So the beauty of router is this pluggable architecture, and it has multiple plugins. It's very easy to write plugins, C++, of course. And it comes with some built-in plugins, the routing plugin, connection tool, metadata cache, and so on, that I will show now. And then there is the front end just to glue everything in and provide a command line options and so on. This is the list of the plugins that exist at the moment. So the routing plugin is the base, the plugin for the endpoints logic that you can configure or rely on the automatic configuration for MySQL cluster and friends. Destination status to keep track of the state of those routing destinations, connection pool, the metadata cache, I will go into details about it, logger, syslog. It has an HTTP server that we use to expose to handle the REST API requests, and I/O, the REST API plugin for this REST API that we expose for quite some time already. It's just not very known. So yeah, let's talk about it, and that's pretty much it. So router is the core component of MySQL architectures. It, as you know, provides a transparent access to the database, and it handles failover. For example, we're connected through router, traffic is going to the primary is gone, auto failover happens, and router will ensure that the connections are routed to the new primary, so it keeps the continuity of the service, and also you can use it for load balancing. It has little to no configuration needed, more or less. There's stuff that you can configure in MySQL architectures. It's stateless, and it's fully integrated in the architectures that we support that I talked this morning: cluster, replica set, cluster sets, and in 8.1 read replicas. Regarding the ports, up to 8.2, router used 2 ports, one for primary traffic and one for secondary traffic, but now we have the option of using a single port for read-write splitting. Bootstrapping. So, router has some initial configuration, but you can use this bootstrapping to do that auto-configuration for the architecture that you deploy. And bootstrapping will it just instruct router to connect to one instance of the topology, doesn't matter which one, any. And router will go there, will fetch the topology information, will query the metadata schema that shell created and populated, will store that status, that state in a dynamic file, this state JSON file, will register itself in the metadata schema, so shell can work with it. Can configure it, will create a configuration file ready to be used, and we'll also create this daemon start stop scripts. So, by the way, you can do this manually. You can just write the configuration file yourself. However, you won't have the automatically or the auto discovery of changes and so on that Router does using the metadata cache plugin. So, for example, you can. Okay, I don't like this. So you can use you can set for example, routing primary. It's one of the ports. You can choose the bind address, bind ports. You can set the list of destinations, and you can pick a routing strategy, round robin, first available, whatever. So you can do this configuration manually for your topology, for your needs. Metadata cache. This is the plugin, the core component plugin, the core plugin for the handling of the MySQL architectures. This is needed to fetch the information and understand where the queries should go in these architectures. And this works by querying the metadata schema by default each half seconds in unitary cluster and replica set, and in cluster set by default 5 seconds. Of course, there was even a blog post from Martin Schuster complaining that when you deploy hundreds, thousands of routers, you're going to have that number of queries happening in half seconds, and it's quite bad, right? So we have for quite some time, I don't know, for how long, the GI notifications?
A lot of time.
A lot of time, right? And it seems that a lot of people still don't know about it. And by making use of this, so group application will push notifications via the X protocol, so you need the X plugin enabled to use this, and we'll send those notifications whenever there are membership changes on the view or quorum loss, and also for role change and state change. And by making use of this, Router can understand when the topology changed and can understand when it actually needs to fetch the metadata scheme. So, yes?
Can I ask the question about Bootstrap?
Yes, do you want to go back?
Bootstrap, is Bootstrap only about creating config?
Yes.
Is it safe to do Bootstrap on every start of the MySQL Router?
Yes. You have to, if you want to use it in one of those topologies, cluster or cassette as well. You need to bootstrap.
On each restart?
Yes. No, restart? No, one time only. Then the configuration file is stored on disk, and whenever you restart.
Is it okay to do on each restart?
No. No. One time only. Yeah. Okay, so like I was saying, Router keeps an open connection to the X plugin port and is waiting for those notifications. And every time one comes in, the Router will query the metadata schema. So with this, you can reduce TTL a lot, or you can disable it. We don't recommend disabling it, but we can reduce it a lot, and this will improve performance of Router in general. Yes?
The TTL should be because if you lose communication, so the router won't receive anything. The TTL is the time that the router will be trying to connect.
Exactly. That's why we don't recommend disabling it, but you can reduce it a lot when using the GI notification.
With the GR notifications, can you get some periodic notification or something that's sort of no-op effectively, so you know it's there? Because if you don't know it's there, then you don't know that it's gone away necessarily.
Right.
You follow? So because you want to know it's there and you want to get something periodically. Obviously, it's not part of any data change, but just so that you don't lose it. Because if you're waiting and you don't get a notification, maybe the other end's dead and you don't know yet.
No, so the notifications that the architecture of this is that the GR plugin inside the server notifies whatever other components listening inside the server that either the quorum was lost, there was a membership change, role change or state change.
Yeah.
But there's no other type of heart beating that GR does. I
Okay,
don't
so
know
GR doesn't do any heart beating,
for the via the X protocol, but
Yeah.
I don't know if the X protocol does heart beating itself.
I don't think it does.
No, it doesn't. So, yeah, so where
Okay, no, just because I was wondering, because it would be nice, even if it's like an op, just then you,
Right.
one end needs to check that the other end's there effectively, and just be happy about it.
Right.
Potentially.
So these are just notifications instructing the router that
Yeah.
look, something has changed, you need to reload.
Yeah,
Whatever.
exactly.
Thanks.
Okay. So deploying router is it's really simple. Just install it. You bootstrap. Like I was saying, you just point to some server of the topology. I'm using the directory option to create the new directory where router will deploy the scripts and the configuration file. Account. Router can create an account, or you can use shell to create an account. So I recommend using shell because it's better. You have control over the account that you're creating, and use this. Please use GR notifications to enable it because by default it's not enabled.
So that will then go to 3306 home, not to the port that's above.
Sorry, I didn't.
The 3306, if you're using GR notifications over the X protocol, that will be using a different.
It's the same. Router will connect there and will understand that the X protocol is running or not. If it's not, well, it will assume the port by default it's that one with a 0 after. If not, it will error out. So
Okay.
you can pass also the correct URI to the X protocol. And that's the script, the start script on the bottom. So you start router after this. And answering your question from before, every time you restart it, you don't need to bootstrap. Deploying router. Router should be seen as an extension of the connector, so it should be deployed together with the application, the client. This allows using, for example, sockets instead of TCP/IP. It decreases network latency. You can have fine-grained account access because you're doing things locally, and you can scale out router in the topology. But of course, you can also, if for some reason, so for some obscure reason, you're paranoid, you can deploy router in different machines if you don't want it together with the application. And you can use a virtual IP on your router and do it that way. Some features, some new, some not so new. This one has 1 year or more. Connection sharing and reuse. So router has this plugin, the connection plugin, and this is disabled by default. So canonical guys, I don't know if you are aware of it. This is disabled by default, and you can enable it, and you can reuse connections that are open to the server and to the client. So server-side connections that the client wanted to close, they will be kept on the pool. And then you can also share connections of that pool. And this is fully configurable. So, like I said, it was disabled by default. You can configure the how many seconds to wait before moving to the pool, the idle timeout, and also the maximum number of idle server connections. So, this is great because you can save a lot of resources because Starlink connections can be expensive. Somewhat related, also regarding performance, TLS session caching. As you know, handshakes can be slow.
About previous,
Okay.
if you reuse connection, is everything variables reset correctly?
Of the session?
Session variable.
Yes. Yeah. So like I was saying, TLS handshakes can be expensive, can take some time, like 50 milliseconds without network latency. So router also provides this caching for the TLS sessions. This one is enabled by default. it's new in 8.1, and it can cache the TLS sessions from the client to router and from router to the server. And it's also configurable regarding the size of the cache, so the maximum number of cache sessions, and also the cache timeouts. REST API, that thing that is old but nobody uses or knows about it. So Router has this HTTP server plugin that is used to expose this, to accept connections, HTTP connections to access the REST API that it also exposes. And this REST API, it follows the Open API spec. And Router exposes a Swagger file to describe it. And in general, the information you can get is status information from the router. So, and also configuration. You can access the metadata cache configuration and status, the list of instances, the routing endpoints, the plugin status, health, destinations, connections, open connections, the blocked hosts, route lists, and so on. This is just an example using curl to access the bootstrap configuration. So this is the cluster that I had running. There's information about the nodes of the cluster, group application ID. And this one, the routes. So the routes are the endpoints that's routed configured. So I have all of them, the read-only port, read-write port, read-write split. And this is an example of a shell plugin. So Fred mentioned before that you can extend shell and you can write Python plugins. There's a framework for that. It's very simple, and Fred wrote this plugin in shell to access that REST API and make it pretty. So this is showing the status of the router, open connections, the endpoints, if they're alive or not, and the type of routing strategy, round robin, first available, protocol, and so on. You can access this using shell, this plugin that Fred has on his.
And this is exposed in the API as well.
Sorry, what?
And it's exposed to the API as well.
Yes. This is just
And the
merging it. Not everything.
No.
Part of it. This is another one, the connections, showing if there are any active connections. You see the source, destination, connection start, and wherever. It's just for demonstration purposes. Okay. Any questions regarding the REST API? Okay, so MySQL REST service. This is something new. It's still on preview release, and this was built on top using the router REST API and HTTP server. So it was implemented as a router feature. Pretty much a way to serve data from your database through clients through REST. So this was built, like I said, using the router feature. It was a router feature, and it exposes a set of commands to do auto rest. So you can tell, hey, please rest this table or this view or procedure, and you can access it through the REST API. And using MySQL Shell for VS Code, you get the GUI frontend to set up these kind of things and use them out and play around.
What the auto-rest coming to what the auto-rest supposed to do? The auto-rest protects the procedure.
What it's supposed to do? It's here.
You start here.
There's an example here. See, here, create REST schema Sakila, and this will, so router understands these queries and will do that transformation and get the REST service available for that table in this case. Yeah, or so yeah, this is there's a blog post about it if you want to try it out. It's in the Oracle MySQL blog from Mike Zinner, and there's an example. how to use this MySQL REST service. This is how the architecture looks like. There's nothing special about it. It's here the router with a MRS plugin, supports various services of authentication and the HTTP server waiting for and router talks with the database. There's also a REST service schema to store information about the REST endpoints. Okay, last but not least, long-awaited feature, read-write splitting. So up to now, router exposed by default to ports, one for primary traffic, one for secondary traffic. And now we have a new port that will do the read-write splitting, so one port to do them all. And it depends on the use case, right? Some people are fine with using with the client application using 2 ports, some others are not. So now it's flexible. You can choose the appropriate means. How does this work? So router, I will show a diagram to the full context and how it works. But router will look at the queries and identify if they should go to the primary or the secondary. And it's also possible to specify it that beforehand using query attributes, or also this SQL here, router set. So there's some examples here. Yes?
Here.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. On the previous slides, you said like it's performance, but it's the usage of the router. Why?
That's the case of using 2 ports.
Okay.
Because the application needs to understand if this is the right query or not. So it's more performance in the sense that the router behaves as a TCP forwarder. In that case, it just forwards packets to the right thing. Doesn't need to parse anything. So with read-write splitting, basic example: select one goes to secondary, inserts go to primary. If you start a read-only transaction, router will understand that immediately, and everything that comes after till the commit, router knows it will should send it to the secondary. And here, this example of query attributes you were asking before. So this is not a run tree.
But that's not in the MySQL command line. That's in the shell.
Yeah, but shell doesn't support this
Yet.
But still, this query attributes does require, like this is an instruction
It's an instruction on the client.
in the client.
It's not. There's no handshake or the round trip to the server.
Are you certain? Because I think that goes MySQL bind params, and I think that goes to the server.
Not certain.
We can check it.
It doesn't go right.
It's part of the same pattern.
It's on the same path, yes. Okay. Thanks.
So there are some attributes that router can use. In this case, you can this example is just setting the access mode that you can also do in the configuration file. You have 3 access modes: read-write, send to the right to the primary, read-only to the secondary, and auto is the read-write split. So if I set read-write here and I do a select after that, the query will go to the primary.
So Miguel, is the SQL parsed by the router or?
Only when needed. So in this case, the first 2 examples. If the query starts with a select, router knows. It doesn't parse anything else.
Okay. Okay, so you don't fully parse the,
No.
query into whatever
No.
to make sure it's correct.
No, not that. This is the full diagram of how read-write splitting works. And starting from top, if the access mode is configured to be read-write, queries go to the primary. This is the behavior when you have the 2 ports. One of the ports is read-write, the other one read-only. So queries on read-only go to secondary. If you have the access mode auto, that is the new one, the query will be sent to the secondary if it is inside the read-only transaction, like I showed before, or if you set the router attribute, or if, in the last case, that's when router needs to understand if this is a select, this is an insert, etc. And in that case, we'll decide whether if the query should go to the read-only destination, or if none of the above is met, the query will go to the primary. And that's it. I'm gonna leave it here. I don't have much more time here.
And one question about the read write. I think you said that you only check for the select and then that should go to the read. But what if it says select for update? Then I guess you
Well,
want that on
it doesn't check just the select. But,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so in that case, what is the latency? Because you're doing the query parsing once, right?
So, Fred did some tests.
Yeah.
You write in your latest blog posts to compare latency of read write
I
splitting.
sent you the slides. I was expecting you to put them out.
I don't have time. You only can be 20 minutes. So, but
ballpark QPS?
So there is of course you pay a bit of the price, but it was very small. I was surprised, to be honest. It was not. I was expecting more overhead. It was order of maybe 2 or 3%.
yeah,
Just wondering if I would select it as a read-only connection, and I still try to write, would it just get like a standard error? Like,
I'm not sure about
the read-only mode.
Yeah, don't shoot the messenger because I'm not a router developer. So about the type of queries that she also asked, if this, for example, select for updates. What will happen? I'm not sure.
Where writes get cache.
Yeah. Then,
What about session tracking?
session what?
Variable tracking.
I didn't understand.
Session variable tracking.
Yeah.
In sense, if you go to the previous slide, so this is one connection, right? And before our user set set time zone equal to certain value, then when the select one goes to the secondary. What about the set time zone?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. This was implemented by Jan, so there are some many details that I need.
I think it will fail.
Think it will fail?
It will just say I don't accept this type of query for on this mode. You need to change mode or connect somewhere else.
Yes.
So if you have a failover, so there will be some latency before.
Yes, there's some latency.
So what happens to those queries?
They just fail.
They return a failure to the app?
Yeah. It's small period of time, but yes. In some demos that I did, you could see that.
So it's possible to add buffering, which we have added it. It's quite easy to add buffering for like short periods of time. Maybe you can consider it.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
No, just
Oh.